Mr. Rainwater.
Hey, Joe.
What do you think about fan baiting? Because you sent me this. I almost called it an article, but it wasn't. It was a Twitter thread or rant, however you want to quantify it. I'm curious to know, when you hear that definition, what goes through your brain? Like, it was about 10 tweets.
Yeah.
Of is she an actual scientist? I don't know.
Yeah, that part of that aspect of that Twitter thread is speculative to me, because somebody will say, they have a PhD or whatever, and they're not verified or anything. So you're like, oh well.
See, but even if they were verified, you don't know what the fucking thing is. Dr. Thala Siren, which is already suspect when your last name is Siren. It's more suspect when your profile picture is the giant alien that Luke Skywalker milks in the Last Jedi. And the bio reads cultural critic, PhD. Now, while that sounds like a farcical concept, I have seen crazier things taught on college campuses in my time.
Yeah, well, I mean, you and I could be considered. We could write cultural critic on our Twitter bio, and it would hold just as valid.
Yeah. So I don't know how much clout I put into this rant. For the sake of the listeners, I'm not going to have you track it down and do it just to get caught up with us, but I will read you the first tweet. Fan baiting is a form of marketing used by producers, film studios, and actors with the intent of exciting artificial controversy, garnering publicity, and explaining away the negative reviews of a new and often highly anticipated production. What are your thoughts, Mr. Rainwater, on this concept?
I mean, in that Twitter thread, Thala goes into mostly discussing controversial subjects around, race and sex within movies. Yeah. So, recast certain characters as being black or whatever, just
black,
changing
female, gay, Muslim, you could
and
change
then
anything.
Having some other part of a fan base for, say, Star Wars, suddenly they get really upset about it. And then that creates all this controversy and interest, right? That's one version of fan baiting. I've talked about another version of fan baiting, or I'm speculating that's fan baiting. I cannot say that it is fan baiting, but going back to the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. Because
I know where you're going with this.
In a previous episode, I had speculated that the studio that released that original trailer did that purposefully, knowing full well that Sonic looked ugly as shit. And basically got the already set up fan base pissed off in talking about it, throwing it all on Twitter, and then, and here's why I think, this was set up is because of how fast they fixed it. I mean, it was almost instantaneous. They didn't really have to hold up production that much. So, as soon as they implemented the fix, suddenly all the original people who were pissed off were like, oh, they listened to us. We're all going to go see this movie. And it ended up being at that time, the most successful video game based movie up to that point. True. So I look at that and I'm like, it could have just been, the whole thing could have been incidental, sure. But I feel like I've seen so many trends, and this started with The Force Awakens. I've seen so many trends where I feel like I've seen Hollywood studios manipulate audiences in much more subtle and, in my opinion, really kind of abusive ways in order to drive people to the theater or to see a movie or whatever, right? Because it's at a certain point, you have to go why would you want to stir the pot so much? And I think the reason... There's a lot going on in the background there.
I live on a very busy street. I apologize.
I have to wonder if it's not a bug but a feature. You know, like if you see a pattern so many times, for me anyway, if I see a pattern occur so many times, after a while I'm just like, this isn't incidental. This is like people have conversations in boardrooms discussing this. And they discuss it so many times to the point they're like, yeah, this works. We're going to keep doing it. Like, so anyway, I could go on, but I kind of want to give you an opportunity to reflect on this, Jow, in regards to like, what are your, because you also had different sort of thoughts about fan baiting when I introduced the subject to you.
Well, here's the thing. There's the age-old saying that what is it? Any press is good press, right? It doesn't matter. Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's good press or bad press. That comes down to the marketing. The whole point of marketing is to create an awareness, right, around a property. So when so here's a possible example of fan baiting that we don't know yet. Rob Zombie's The Munsters.
Yeah, I think it might be fan baiting.
I think it is entirely possible that Rob Zombie did a cut of that trailer on a fucking iPad and used some stock shit, you know what I mean? And just dropped it, not doing any audio work, not doing any kind of color correction or anything like that. Just to make people go, holy shit, this is terrible. How did a giant movie studio actually produce something so poor quality? Yeah. And it's not in the same vein of we put a black actor in a white role or like something like that. But the point was, it got people talking about, wow, that looks terrible. And now it's to the point where everybody was going, oh, a Munsters movie, I don't care, to, oh, this is going to be fucking horrible train wreck. I want to watch this. And that's exactly what happened with me. That's how I looked at it. I was like, I'm curious to see what the fuck Rob Zombie, because his movies, his filmography does not lend itself to screwball, campy comedy television show from the 60s. Yeah. So I was curious at that point, right? But that didn't mean that they were getting my $8.50. I wasn't going to the movie theater to watch this movie because I wanted to see how bad it was. But they knew if they put out a trailer like that, and then they were like, oh, it's dropping on streaming. Oh, I'm fucking watching this shit. I don't have to pay for it. And all they have to do is look at it and say, hey, look at those numbers. Boom, 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 boom. And maybe Universal makes some money from Netflix. You know what I mean? Just for per viewing. I don't know what their deal is. I don't know what it is. But what they did do was create buzz, which is all that you have to do. So the idea that everybody's like, oh, I'm tired of them remaking everything, make something new, blah, blah, blah. The message that you're sending to the studios is, I'm tapping out. I'm bored of this. I don't care anymore. Yeah. Whereas everybody and their fucking sister has a YouTube movie review page these days, and you can't trash a movie unless you've seen it. Right? You have to watch it so you can point out examples of why it's bad. So what they do is they do things that will make you watch the movie. Doesn't care if you went in hating it. They don't care if you're going to trash it in your review. They don't care. They've got your click. They've got your $8.50. They've got whatever it may be. That's all that matters to them. Right. I hate it because I'm in the business of artistry. I want to create something that's going to influence people positively. It's thoughtful. Yeah. It's going to stand the test of time. Yeah. This is the epitome of cash grab.
Oh, I mean, I feel like it's a really bad signal right now as to like how Hollywood is doing as an industry. If this is like where they have to go in order to get people into seeing a movie, even though I saw a trailer. I can't remember what. I think it was for Elvis. I saw the trailer for 3,000 Years of Longing. That trailer was all I needed. Like, it was like new movie by George Miller. and it's got Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba. I'm there. You don't have to say anything else. Give me the date, I'll show up. Like, there's a David Bowie documentary coming out soon called Moon Age Daydream. All I needed was to see footage. I knew it was about Bowie. I'm there. You got me. You know, you just give me, take all my money. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing that was like, I can't know what's going on behind the scenes, right? For these movies. Like, the Munsters movie probably was not a very easy sell. Rob Zombie probably had to contractually do another movie with Universal and was like, I don't really fucking want to do this shit. The Munsters, let's do that, you know? And Universal's like, okay. Like,
we're giving you this amount of money. And he was like, all right. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it was like, oh, I don't need that. Or he probably even gave some back. And they were like, we'll give you this. He'll be like, I could do it for less. And they were probably like, okay. Not going to have a problem there.
And that's how Universal finds himself in that position where they're like, okay, well, we still have to sell this thing. How are we going to do it?
Yeah.
And that's when they have to get creative. The way that they're getting creative sucks. I agree with you on that. I will say, like, assuming that this is really a real thing, the whole fan baiting thing, I'm making this assumption. Like I said, I've seen this pattern happen too many times to the point where I'm like, this isn't just like accidental. Like, this is totally, this is totally a thing. And then you have, you know, the way that they're marketing the Munsters movie. There's the other aspect of it, right? Which is the, you know, people who like to complain about it kind of complain about like the woke, quote unquote, aspect of fan baiting, right?
Yeah.
So like, I know that I noticed this with The Force Awakens in like the other Star Wars movies that came out after that, where it was like, you know, making a big deal about, oh, we're adding this diverse cast and all this other stuff, and then I'm like, okay, cool, great. I mean, it's not like the original Star Wars. I mean, original Star Wars is pretty, you know, a lot of white people, but like, it's not like there was zero, you know, diversity in those movies. Although I might take myself back on that. But anyway,
in the first movie, I mean, you have James Earl Jones as a voice. And outside of that, I do not believe there are any people of color that are represented. Yeah. It's mostly white British people.
It's diverse in that way.
You know,
British voice.
It's kind of, if you look at it, it was kind of, you know, an American versus British kind of
no, it's extremely
thing.
It's extremely white, and it's you know, that didn't bother anybody at the time, and then, you know, we update. I mean, basically, what happened is Disney wanted to update Star Wars for a more modern time, and just be like, there's kind of too many white people in the story. We need something that sort of more reflects.
Reflects
people's lives.
Sure.
Nowadays, right?
But see, I have long thought about this as a filmmaker, because I've been able to watch movies where I don't, quote unquote, see myself.
Yeah.
Or I'm not represented at all. So like, I can watch the movie Friday with Ice Cube and Chris Tucker, and I can fucking enjoy the shit out of that movie. I can watch you know, the movie How High. It's another movie with a mostly black cast, and like the white guy is very nerdy and uptight, and he's like the narc on campus and this and that. And I'm like, well, that's not me, you know, but I can still identify with these guys because they're funny and they're laid back and whatever. And I think to myself, well, if I can do that, why can't other people do that? You know what I mean? Like, why can't people of color? Why can't gay people? Blah, blah, blah. And then it started occurring to me, well, what if that was every movie? You know what I mean? Like, every movie was just an entire cast of black people, or an entire cast of gay people. Eventually it gets tiring, and you're like, well, I'd like to see a straight white guy up there at some point doing something that's not like mustache twirling. You know what I mean? And I'm still waiting for the day where, you know, the evil businessman isn't always the sniveling white guy doing something.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because there are definitely business people who are not white people that are doing terrible things in the world. That's not even debatable. But I get it. Like, I get the idea that you want to, because number one, it can be tiring for people to not see themselves. And number two, if people were like, you know what I mean? Like, there are entire franchises. If they started like, and this is never going to happen, but if they were like, we're rebooting Medea, but we're doing it with like John Cryer playing Medea or something, like, you know what I mean? Like a white cast doing Medea. I might check it out. I don't know. I've never watched a Medea movie in my life. You know what I'm saying? Like, that has an entire fan base. It has a giant, crazy, mostly African-American fan base.
It's its own cinematic universe.
Right.
For sure.
But it doesn't have my 850. So if the producers were like, hey, we want to get some white people in here, we want to get their money too, what are they going to do? They're going to start sprinkling in either white characters more, or they're going to completely whitewash the entire thing and say, hey, let's, create some fan baiting and get some people to watch it. And it might work for me. That's the, you know what I mean? That's weird.
I was actually going to comment on that because Medea movies don't really have fan baiting. Like, it has a very, I think Tyler Perry's like, there's an audience for this stuff. I'm just
going for that audience.
Yeah, it's the same thing with Kevin Smith. Like, Kevin Smith is like, I have a very specific audience. They're my audience. I'm not going to go outside that. I don't need to,
right.
And I think that's a very pragmatic way of looking at it, because there is, I mean, not every director gets that opportunity, but I think a lot of artists get opportunities where they have an established audience and they just create for that audience, and it doesn't matter, right, when anybody outside of that audience thinks about their work. Disney, on the other hand, going back to sort of the original instigator of this topic, Disney is a mega corporation, and their goals are always ambitiously to be global, to appeal to every single possible human being that they can appeal to, because they want to make as much money as is possible. Yep. Which is why they bought the Star Wars license from George Lucas, which is why they bought out Marvel outright, pretty much, because they could see the potential in those franchises, because even before Disney got its hands on them, they were already sort of ubiquitously popular across the world. Like, everybody knows Spider-Man on some level or another. I mean, you see even parodies of it in the sense, or not parodies, but like jokes about it in the sense that, like, there's a Japanese iteration of Spider-Man. There's an Italian iteration of Spider-Man. There's all these different... Actually, I think the Italian Spider-Man thing is a goof, but there's a lot of different iterations of Spider-Man across the world because everybody likes Spider-Man. Stan Lee and Steve Ditko kind of talk about the idea of, like, when they made Spider-Man, they want his face to not be seen so that anybody could sort of implicate themselves into that character. So Disney, obviously, they grab hold of these properties and they're like, okay, what do we need to do, right? They go into committee mode and they're like, all right, what do we need to do to make sure that we are not, excluding any particular demographic or audience? And so, they make these choices about what characters are going to be represented by what demographics and all this other stuff. Now, I look at it from the outside. I'm like, that looks like a horrible artistic experience, right? Like, it doesn't look fun at all, because I want to pick the people who are the right people for the job, regardless of, what their background is. Like, I'm going to pick somebody who I think is best for the role, that is just best for the role. And, I'm sure the people who cast those movies tried to do that as much as possible, but we all understand, looking from the outside, there was also a certain aspect of, a producer who was like, oh, but we got to make sure, person of color, woman, like, there's always that aspect of it. And so going back to sort of the original Twitter thread that we were talking about, Thala implicates the idea that, like, companies like Disney, from the very get-go, make these choices with the explicit arrangement that we are going to create controversy and we're going to use that controversy to sell tickets. And makes a further implication that it actually is harmful to the actors who get cast. So, like, I know that there's been a lot of conversation for both Daisy Ridley and is the actor who plays Finn, is that John Boyega?
Yeah.
Both of them got a lot of like negative attention, right? Because they were probably the two most prominent characters in the movies, but sure. a lot of the old guard Star Wars fans saw them as like, you know, invasive into the property or whatever, and, you know, basically put a target on them as being like, oh, you're the reason why Star Wars sucks now. Like, you're the people who are destroying my childhood. So that was sort of so Thala makes the claim that, you know, Disney's choices, conscious choices to do that are actually what, you know, causes a lot of emotional harm for, like, you know, Daisy Ridley or John Boyega. How much harm they've really suffered, you know, because I'm sure they're doing just fine financially at this point. They can afford therapy to move on and you know, wipe their hands off with it and just be like, you know, whatever, find another movie. That's sort of up for debate. But
it's interesting to me though, because I don't really think when the new Star Wars came out that, don't get me wrong, there was a pocket of misogynistic, racist motherfuckers with keyboards popping off on the internet before this movie came out. That existed. There is no denying that. But I do believe that they were a tiny ass minority in the overall vocal conversation of the movie. What the problem was, and this is what the fan baiting is considered, is where the parent company comes out and basically brushes almost the entire fan base, the existing fan base, or anyone who's critical of the property as that group of vocal, misogynistic, racist motherfuckers.
Right.
And the problem there is the normal fans who have critiques that are completely valid they feel as though they need to step into either of two shoes. It's like, well, no one's going to believe me if I say I'm not a racist, misogynistic piece of shit. So you know what? I'm going to lean into that and I'm going to torment Daisy Ridley and John Boyega on Twitter. And then the other half of it is just going to be either silent or say that they were wrong and just start saying, you know what? I fell in love with it after my third viewing and I realized I was wrong and blah, 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 to try and save face. Here's the thing though. That's the fan baiting thing that Dr. Thala Siren brings up, is that they use these things as a defense shield against any valid critique of story, writing, direction, cinematography, editing, whatever the fuck it may be. I don't blame Daisy Ridley or John Boyega for fucking Rise of Skywalker.
Right.
I don't think anybody does. And after looking at The Force Awakens, the rational people who saw that movie, it was very clearly a retread of A New Hope, but it was still enjoyable. Anyone who looks at that says, well, I know that fucking J.J. Abrams knows how to write and direct a decent movie, so obviously this isn't entirely his fault. Who am I going to pin it on? Kathleen motherfucking Kennedy. She's the CEO. She made all these choices. And then innately, fan baiting again. Well, these are just misogynistic little fanboys with their toxic masculinity crying about a woman in charge and blah, 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 blah. When in fact, it was nothing about her being a woman. It was more about the fact that they gave the franchise to Rian Johnson without a plan and let him do whatever he did. And it divided the fan base because, like, me and you have different thoughts on The Last Jedi. But we both can agree there was no plan in place, and it was not using setups and payoffs, which is the expected kind of storytelling you get with a Star Wars franchise movie. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you were watching some random ass space movie or something like that and Rian Johnson made those choices, no one's going to give a shit. Some people will champion the movie till no ends. Other people will be like, yeah, it wasn't for me, and move on with their lives. But you do it in a previously established franchise, and all of a sudden shit goes off the rails. But now they have a shield against it. And well, those people are just insert derogatory naming there.
Yeah.
And Dr. Thalasiren pointed out that this started back with Ghostbusters in the 2016 when they recasted them with women. Now, I'm not going to lie and say everybody was like, wow, I'm so excited for these 4 women to step into the roles of the Ghostbusters and make a Ghostbusters movie. Most people in that instance were not excited from the start. Then the trailer dropped, and I think the rest of the people who were like, I think I'm going to give it a chance, were like, nope, this is not it. Yeah. And the problem is that it was a completely departure from the type of humor that the original franchise carried.
Yeah, that was a movie I tried to give the full chance and felt regret about it because it was just not a well done movie from the get-go, which I think it doesn't say anything about who they cast in the movie. It says everything about, like, to me, I'm like, it sucks for the people that they cast because it's like, this is a giant opportunity for these actresses because like they're taking on a huge, like, for a lot of people, it's sort of a childhood movie kind of a thing. They're putting themselves in front of a huge audience and they kind of just, they fuck up the layup. Like it was just such a bad execution of what could have been a fine idea if executed properly, and it just wasn't executed properly.
See, and I do blame the actresses in this particular instance a little bit, only because you could tell there was a considerable amount of improvisation on that set.
Sure.
And
is that their fault or is that the director's fault though?
It's a shared sin, because in some extent, if you're going to play a Ghostbuster, you kind of have a responsibility to watch the previous incarnations of Ghostbusters. Now, I'm not saying they had to go back and watch the fucking cartoons, and you know what I mean? Like just watch the damn movies.
Yeah.
And then you have to understand, what was about this that made this enduring? What was it appealing about it? And not necessarily, like, I understand wanting to do something different. Like,
yeah,
there's a discussion about the Halloween movies with Rob Zombie doing the remakes, and people went off the fucking wall when he did that. You know what I mean? Like, he completely did a left turn with it. Like, you're not supposed to tell the backstory of Michael Myers and explain why he's crazy and why he goes after who and da-da-da-da. It ruins everything. Completely disregarded the original type thing. And it was a remake. And I've looked at that since, and I was one of the people popping off on the internet with hatred for that movie when it came out. Since then, I've been able to reevaluate my life and go, well, you know what? It doesn't delete the original. The original doesn't stop being printed on DVD and Blu-ray because this movie came out. I can watch the original anytime I want, and it's not impacted by Rob Zombie making his movie. So why do I give a shit that much? Why I did give a shit still was because I wanted more of the John Carpenter Halloween, and I wasn't going to get that as long as Rob Zombie's was popular. And you know what I mean? Like it was a roadblock in the way. Now, as a filmmaker and an artist, this is one of those situations where I self-evaluate and I go, well, motherfucker, if you don't like what's being seen, why don't you make it yourself and shut your mouth? And that's the kind of mindset I get a lot of these days when I see franchises going in different directions, where it's like people would rather complain or make a 20-minute YouTube essay explaining why this is bad or whatever like that. When all I'm thinking is, it comes back to this a quote from Batman the Animated Series. If you're so smart, why aren't you rich? If you know what's right, if you know what's best, why don't you do it? And that to me is inspiring. That's the way I take it. I turn it into a positivity. It's like, well, that wasn't for me. I wish they would do this. I'm going to do this. And that's kind of how I've been using my guiding light since then. So I don't get fan baited anymore. And I don't get into that. What I do agree with, I just saw today online. There's a guy, I brought him up before. His name's Eric D. July. He has his own comic book company. He's a black libertarian YouTuber. And he's very often going off about the wokeness of modern comic books and movies and so on and so forth. And he makes the claim that the people who get upset about things don't buy tickets anyway. And if you look at comic book sales, if you look at movie sales, yeah, they don't. If that was such a majority, they don't buy that. And that's a business standard that's going to fall flat on its face. So I don't think fan baiting is really going to work in the long term. I think it's a passing fad that they're trying out, because if you get signed to a management company these days, one of the first things they're going to look at is your following. Do you have tens of thousands of followers on Twitter or Instagram? Do you have 10 TikToks that went viral in the last 3 months? Do you have, like, they look at those numbers as some kind of metric that matters. Yeah. At the end of the day, it doesn't. It really doesn't. But they like having that false data, that misrepresentation data, because I think it defends their jobs. Yeah, I think when they look at their boss, they're like, well, look, this guy had this many followers. That was free advertising. We thought it would work. It didn't. And then the boss is just like, okay, well, let's move on to the next one. And they can keep doing what they're doing. But at the end of the day, I don't think you're making that money.
Yeah, numbers have this magical ability to stupefy people, because if they see a number bigger than they expect, they immediately make some connection of like, oh, this actor or this creator or whoever, they have some magical property that could connect with the audience. And it's like, well, it's not magic. It's just like they either have trained at a craft or they instinctively understand it in a way that you don't. And, it's interesting because, like, what's funny is I see tons of creators on, like, YouTube, right? Mm-hmm. Who so often I see numbers that match their skill. And I generally, not always, every once in a while I'll see a channel where I'm like, how does this person have like 1 million subscribers? Same. But like, I generally will watch something and I'll be like, oh, that is so good. I hope this person has a bajillion subscribers. And they do frequently, and it's across like a broad spectrum of things. Like, there's this creator, I guess I'll call him, by the name of Brandon Rogers, who makes like comedy videos. They are hilarious. They're like some of the funniest fucking shit I've ever watched. And like, he's just doing it pretty much like independently. And he's got like, I can't even remember how many millions of subscribers on his YouTube channel, but like it matches. And yet Hollywood's not going to fucking pick this guy up. And quite frankly, he doesn't need that. Like, he can just do it on his own. He doesn't ever have to bother with that system. And after a while, it almost kind of seems like people who do well through like social media mechanisms, who do get picked up by Hollywood, it's often like at their loss and Hollywood's gain. Like, Hollywood doesn't really help people so much anymore in that sense. But I'm curious as to what you're researching at this moment, Zhao.
I'm listening to you, but I was going to make a point here.
Yeah, what is the point? I'm curious.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
And I want to know your honest answer, and it's okay when you tell me I don't know anything. Outside of Game of Thrones and the DC properties, what films or television shows have you heard of that star Jason Momoa? You know who Jason Momoa is?
Yeah.
Outside of Game of Thrones or a DC property movie, what properties of Jason Momoa are you aware of?
That's it. That's all I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I don't know if you are sexually attracted to Jason Momoa or not, but my wife...
Oh, he's a stud.
Okay, we can agree he's a good-looking man. My wife, my little sister, my own mother will openly admit that they drool about this man.
Sure. Right.
Not one of those people have seen any of these things. Ready? Something called C, the final chapter. I've never heard of it. This is all things that, by the way, came out after Game of Thrones. I just might want to make sure that I point that out because I feel like that's important. Got a 7.6 out of 10 on IMDb. A movie called Sweet Girl, 5.5 out of 10. A movie called Frontier, 7.1 out of 10. Braven, 5.9 out of 10. Once Upon a Time in Venice, 5.3 out of 10, also starring Bruce Willis. Sugar Mountain, 5.4 out of 10. The Bad Batch, 5.2 out of 10. The Red Road, 7.3 out of 10. Debug, 4.3 out of 10. Wolves, 5.2 out of 10. Road to Paloma, 6.0 out of 10. Bullet to the Head, also starring Sylvester Stallone, 5.7 out of 10. And last but not least, a movie that I'm sure you have heard of, you just didn't think of it at the time, Dune.
Oh, that's right, he is in Dune. I forget that he's in Dune.
Dune was 8.0 out of 10. That's the only thing out of everything. Now, whether or not you've watched any of those previously stated properties, the question that I bear to you is, are you aware of any of those existing outside of me just listing them right now?
Nope.
Exactly.
Yeah, not at all.
If something is notable, I may not watch it. I've never seen a fucking frame of Bridgerton, but I am aware of its existence. You know what I mean? Like, it's notable. I know it exists. But Jason Momoa can't get these things off the ground when any woman or any person who's attracted to men knows who Jason Momoa is, fawns over Jason Momoa, but they don't watch that fucking thing that he made. You know what I mean? Like, he may have millions of followers, but it doesn't fucking matter. And that's the point that I'm making here, is that when you have these people, it's not enough. All of those numbers don't mean shit. I think I tweeted this a couple months ago when I went to 90s Con. I saw, and they will remain nameless, a celebrity who was at 90s Con who had hundreds, and I mean hundreds of thousands of followers. Not 100,000. I think it was more like 600,000 followers, right? Sitting alone at their booth. Not a person in line to meet them, to get their autograph, to take a picture with them. They looked bored as shit. You know what I'm saying? We all chase that number on social media. It doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't. The content is what ends up mattering. So when you end up, staking all these things on the numbers, we're getting all these social media hits with all this fan baiting outrage and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's good for headlines. It looks like you're doing your job, but you're really not doing anything that's going to move the needle. So I don't think that really matters. I think it's just something that people do as like a shot in the dark to save a terrible property or a terrible piece of art, or I dare call it art, to get, that attention to it.
Yeah.
So I want to pivot now, and I want to ask you a question, because we've talked about how other people do it. In your work, how much inclusion do you use when you are creating? And do you have a motivated reason why? So like when you're working on Trailer Park Warlock, how many characters would you qualify as a minority? And was there a choice behind designing them that way? Because you are not in a position where you have someone over your head telling you, you need more black characters here. Do you, you know what I'm saying? Do you have anything in there, or do you not? Because like, before you even answer, I will tell you right now, in Haunted, I have 0 African-American characters by design. And that's because most of the people that I talk to who are African-Americans, who are black people, and I talk to them, they love horror movies. It's undeniable. Jordan Peele has proven that. It's existed for, you go back to Night of the Living Dead, there's a black person in a movie and black people were thrilled to see it. they don't like haunts. They don't like people jumping out and scaring them. And I've been told this quote several times. I'm sure everybody just thinks it's funny to tell to a white person, but my life is scary enough with the police. I don't need to deal with this fake demon shit. You know what I'm saying? And plus a lot of them are very religious. And so they don't like to, they feel like they're dabbling with the wrong thing in that aspect. So by design, no one in Haunted is African-American or any of that thing. I am open-minded towards casting people who are not typically religious or African-American. If I had an Asian actress or actor come through, I'd be like, all right, I can read that personality that matches this character. Perfect. I would be less inclined to cast a Middle Eastern person in this film because I wouldn't necessarily see a Middle Eastern person who's more often than not religious, not always, but more often than not, doing this as well. That's another motivating reason why some people don't go to things like this. If you know what I mean, if I saw someone who was of the queer community and they match the personality, I'm going to be like, fucking right, I'm casting that person. This character wasn't written as gay, but gay doesn't matter in this because there's no relationships. There's nothing about gay, straight, doesn't matter in this thing, whatever. They just fit that character. Boom, casted at that character because gay people fucking love horror. They love haunts. They love the whole 9 yards, the theatricality of it. Everything fucking fits. Do you know what I'm saying? So like there was a design when I came across doing that. When I wrote fucking short film that's the posters behind me the whole time, Terror House, what I wanted to do was find a way where I could put an African American in this situation. And I thought, well, what if, they tell me all the time, I'm scared of the police, I don't need to deal with this shit. What if there was a black man whose situation was he was trapped in his house because he was wrongly accused of something by the police. He got off and the police are still harassing him to the point where they camp outside his house. And if he leaves his house, they tail him and da-da-da-da. And he doesn't want to get arrested for doing something or framed or whatever like that. What if he was signed up to go to the haunt and he didn't go because obviously he doesn't want to leave the house. So guess what? They broke into the house without the cops seeing and they set up a fucking masterful haunt in his fucking house. And he has to find a way out. Not only can I play with themes of living your life, facing adversity, things like that. I can touch on social topics with whether or not he does call the police to come and save him with these people in his house. Does he trust the police? There's a lot of dilemma and drama that can get wrung out of this. That's interesting to me. That works in this situation. Him going and walking through the woods, not so much. So it came down to the point where I realized I can tell the stories properly. I can represent people properly. I can use realistic motivations that people have in real life to motivate my characters and my story to tell compelling stories, to tell stories that mean something, that aren't just cheesy, jump out, scare you, slash, and blah, blah, blah. They are that. They're fun, but they have a level deeper, right? To shoehorn him into Haunted would have been the wrong move. And I don't think black audiences would have appreciated that as much as anybody else that went to go see it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like they would be like, there are black people who will call out token characters and be like, no black man would ever do that. Like, you want to write responsibly. You want to write authentically. You want to use things that are common knowledge to people. So that's how I went about writing it. So if someone came to me and said, well, you just whitewashed the whole fucking cast of Haunted, there's not a black soul in that movie. Yeah, that was on purpose. But Terror House, on the other hand, completely different situation. Do I have a design where I would have that character, if he survived, in another movie in the Haunted franchise in the future? There may be inklings going around in my head. If he did survive, how would I bring him in? How would he tie into the plot now? How could, you know what I'm saying? Like, you can make it work, but you have to do it authentically. You have to do it with that mindset, because I think even if, you know, they put a white person in a Medea movie, you can get away with that because it's just a stupid comedy movie, right? You can get away with anything. But when you're trying to tell legitimate, authentic stories and represent people accurately, you got to understand the truth of the matter. You have to be honest. Excuse me.
Yeah.
with everything. So I'm curious to know, when you were designing Trailer Park Warlock or any of your other things, did any of that enter your mind? Because we don't have mandates to include so-and-so or whatever like that. So I'm just curious to know, from a creator standpoint, what your point of view is.
I mean, with Trailer Park Warlock, I do have minority characters in it, and it's one of those things where there wasn't like a super grounded reason for picking why this or that character is this or that race or whatever. It's just, it seemed to fit the character in the sense of this looks right to me. You know what I mean? Like, there's a character named Bev who is a bartender, and she was a character that started off as a side character and sort of took a little more prominence as the story went on. And it was a character that just seemed appropriate to me, you know? Like, I wasn't thinking about it in the same depth that you're thinking about it, right?
It was just a gut instinct kind of thing where you were like, this feels right. And sometimes we've talked about that, where you just kind of go with your gut. You look at it. And
the other part of it was like, I just felt like because in my mind when making that comic, I wanted to reflect sort of America in some sort of way. And America isn't just like it isn't just a white bread nation. It's like,
no,
it's a nation of many different people from many different walks of life.
Yep.
And that's something that I don't feel like I reflected that well in Trailer Park Warlock, because in order to do that, I would have to have way less animal characters, quite frankly. It's a very diverse cast in that sense, because they're fucking, gods and penguins and all this other shit going on. And that for me is kind of, I think that expresses more to the point, like, what's going on for me, which is like, I'm less interested in having every character be human. I'm sort of interested in having characters who are outside of that realm, Yeah. And either for purposes of humor or for purposes of sort of illustrating an idea of like the idea of what is sentience, right? Because in my mind, that in itself sort of mimics the idea of expressing diversity, because really the idea that we all have to sort of come to terms with, for people who for people who like have a hard time understanding people from other demographics or other walks of life, is just understanding the basic idea that if you're a thinking creature, you have basic fundamental similarities between each other. And so for me, that's kind of how I go about it with writing, where it's just like, I don't really care on a certain level whether or not these characters are human, robot, whatever. I'm going to try and have them have similarities in, for lack of a better word, humanity. If that's not really the proper word, right? The idea of just conveying commonality between living creatures. And so like, I'm approaching it from a much more broad and general sort of place that's gets the point of abstraction, right? But I feel like it serves a similar function. And I think if you want to look at Disney, right, and like if you want to look at it from like what they were doing from the most optimistic, like good intention perspective, that's kind of what they're trying to do, right? Is they're trying to evoke this idea of like, we're all human, we're all the same, we all cry, we all bleed, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's where they're trying to get at it from a best intention standpoint. But once again, the execution's always like muddles the whole thing to the point where you're not really sure if they really are operating on best intentions, right?
Because most of the time it doesn't feel like they're storytelling. It feels like they're marketing during the movie. You know what I'm saying? Like that to me is where things come against it. Now, see, the way you're talking about approaching art is much different about me, or much, much different than mine, because, and I don't know if they may not impress it as hard, but for filmmaking, they really instill on you, and this is more towards the acting than anything else. If you are an actor, you have to be considerate about every minute thing you do when the camera is on you, because it's going to be blasted on 100-foot screen in front of people. So if you wipe your nose, you are saying something by wiping your nose. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if you're on stage and you wipe your nose, it might just be the audience will get it. Oh, they had a thing of sweat and they wanted to wipe it or whatever. They could read it as, oh, this character has a cocaine habit. In a movie, you wipe your nose, either you have the virus or you have a cocaine issue. It means something. So my brain is wired to think when I'm writing, if a person is black, it means something to the story. It has to mean something to the story. It was the same thing when I approached Cemetery Sweethearts, right? The love interest, the female love interest, is a trans woman. Well, that can't just be a trans woman for the sake of being a trans woman. It has to mean something for the overall point, the thematic premise, if you will, of the story. And the thematic premise of the story is about crossing over, transitioning to a new type of life, transitioning to a new mindset, a new way of thinking, a new you know what I mean? Like a new world, all of these ideas. So that character instantly becomes a mentor to our hero, who's, kind of stubborn, ignorant, and not really forward thinking. He doesn't really know what he's doing with his life. He doesn't want to know. This character here has been through some shit. So now that he has decided to start making changes in his life, he needs somebody to kind of point him on the right direction on where he's supposed to go, how he's supposed to do it, the problems that are coming, and everything starts fitting in. Because the problem is everything has to matter, because in 2 hours, I got to tell this whole fucking story. I have no time to waste. I have no character to waste. If they don't have a point or a purpose, they got to go. They got to get melded into another character. They got to get cut, whatever it may be. So my mind, that's one of the reasons why I would say the most predominant reason whenever I think like that. And I guess it's a shame on me because I don't think about that when I make a character white. I don't think to myself, well, why does this character have to be white? You know what I mean? And that I think is probably something I will have to hammer on myself in terms of developing my writing better, to be more aware. I don't want to call it woke, but more aware of what I'm doing and apply it equally across my characters. Because if a character has to be black for a reason, a character should have to be white for a reason. And I don't really think like that when I write white characters. And I think that's something I need to do to grow as a writer, to grow as an artist and a storyteller. And I will. You know what I mean? But I'm not going to sit here and not do art now because I haven't figured that out, because it may take me 20 years. It may take me 5 minutes. I don't know. It's on my mind and I'm working on it. But until I get it, I'm not going to stop making art for the sake of trying to better my abilities, because then I'll never make art. I'll never learn from the mistakes. But I am aware of it, and I am trying to fix it. And I think that is the point that I'm trying to get to all the artists and storytellers and creators that are listening to us, is that you do need to be aware of those kinds of things for your own sake, not for the marketing team, not for the CEO or the executive producer or the editor or whoever the fuck is telling you that you need to have this, or, you know what I mean? Like, that tracks well, or this sells better. Fuck all that bullshit.
Sure.
Look inside you as an artist and self-examine. Understand why you do what you do, and then figure out whether or not you like that. Figure out if it's working. Figure out if you can make it better. Figure out if you can help someone else with it. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of internalization that I think needs to be done by artists that will remove the fan baiting aspect of something, but also allow for representation, allow for diversity, allow for those, you know what I mean? Where it feels genuine, it feels sincere, it matters, it moves people, it moves us forward. And I think that's the responsibility of the artist. I think that we will get those directives from the higher ups that, oh, you need to have a gay character in this movie. All right, well, if I'm going to do a gay character, I shouldn't just do a gay character for the sake of doing a gay character, but I want to do gay character right. I want to do a gay character who has meaning. I want to make straight white Nazi KKK people in the South fall in love with this gay character for some reason that might move them an inch forward towards humanity. Like, as artists, I know that like a lot of people say, oh, we don't need a savior. We don't need white saviors and this and that. This isn't about being white. This is about being an artist. I think that is our job, is to lay the groundwork for the social climate, for humanity to look to on how to better themselves, how to better society, how to approach situations that make us uncomfortable or that we don't know how to handle, right? Because like when I watch a TV show and they show somebody negotiating how they got a higher pay job, I'm like, huh, that's how you do it. I've never seen someone negotiate their fucking salary. So, okay, maybe the next time I do that, I'll try that. But I saw it in a TV show first. That's where we have importance. That's where we as artists matter. So I don't think fan baiting is the right way to go, but I think there is something positive that artists can take away from the concept of recasting or inclusion. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think we have a responsibility to do it and make it work so that the marketing people shut the fuck up and and we please the fan base. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think anybody would have been pissed off. I mean, don't get me wrong, there would have been people pissed off, but I think the majority of people would have been thrilled if Donald Glover had got cast as Spider-Man when they were doing that campaign, because he would have been fucking perfect. And I would not have cared that it was recasting a white character as a black man, because I think Donald Glover is a phenomenal fucking actor. I think he fits the mold of Peter Parker. And it just so happens that his skin is a different color than the fucking comic book. I think he could have, you know what I mean? Like, it just, that to me would have been fucking great. But at the same time, I also get, and I know I'm ranting so long, I'm sorry, Rainwater.
Oh, no.
I also get something that, and this is, I'm going to go back to that guy, Eric D. July, who was ranting earlier about he doesn't want black people to have white people's sloppy seconds. He's like, that's a white character. I don't want that white character. I want a black character with his own powers, his own backstory, his own blah, 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 that is awesome. Like, I don't want to be taking this from white people. I don't want their sloppy seconds. I want us to create something of our own. We have Black Panther, we have Blade, we have Storm. Like, these are fucking great characters. You wouldn't recast any of those characters to be Asian or Middle Eastern or, and you know what I mean? Like, if you want to see that character, if you want to see a great black character, create a great black character. And that's what he did. That's why he made his own comic books universe and launched it like that. Like, I subscribe to that as well, because I think that's how we all should create as artists. We shouldn't be just co-opting something that exists and making it different for different sake and stuff like that. I think we should be creating from scratch, and that's where new things are going to come that we're going to get excited about. You know what I mean? Like,
for sure.
It's hard for me to ride that line, because it's hard for me to say, yeah, Donald Glover could be Spider-Man. He'd be fucking great at it, and I would love to see that. And at the other time, I was like, oh, I want to see another character created. I don't want to, you know what I mean? I want to see something from scratch that's new and just so happens to be black or is black for a reason.
That to me is the most important part, I think, and the most interesting aspect of sort of all the shaking up that's happened, I think, societally, is that you are getting this potentially new and fertile ground where you just have new ideas sort of beginning to rise up. And I mean, it's going to take a while, because we still have to sort of get through, I don't know, people getting bored of dumb old Hollywood shit, basically. But I mean, like, on a certain level, I do think that on the other end of it, there is room for all these new ideas to sort of pop up and spring up and kind of create a new renaissance, not just in movies, but just like in storytelling in general. But anyway, I think I really liked everything that you had to say previously. And I don't know if I have anything else to add in regards to that.
Right now, I just looked up, you know, everybody knows that Superman was created in 1930. Was it 38?
I think it's around 38. I'm not sure the exact date.
I know Batman was 38.
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man wasn't created until 1962. Wonder Woman was 1941, I think, or 42. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
there were decades between when we had these icons, and I'm sure if you go back, I know James Gunn does, but when he fucking makes his movies, if you go back, there are tons of fucking quote unquote filler of superheroes that were created and failed. Like, nobody remembers them. They don't have their own franchise movies. They weren't represented in the fucking the Justice League Unlimited or anything like that. Like, these are like obscure characters. And I think what we have to realize is in present day, we have to be patient because people are going to be trying things here and there. They're not going to work. They're not going to connect with audiences. They're not going to be fully thought out. They're just going to fall by the wayside. And then eventually, if we keep trying, we will find something that we do gravitate to. Yeah. And I think the big patience that, you know what I mean? Like the idea of turning Green Lantern gay. I don't know if he was intended to be gay. There's arguments to be made for and against in that instance, but there are, you know what I mean? There is an opportunity to make it like, okay, so right now I would say the only gay superhero that really kind of connects with audiences would be Deadpool, right? Because he's openly bisexual. Yes, no, or is he not?
I think so. I'm not sure.
I'm not entirely sure either. I think that's kind of the sexuality that they play with, is it's ambiguous. But yeah, the point of the matter is that's representation. And you could argue at one point he was a bigger seller than Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman combined. You know what I mean? Like, sure. He had a moment there, and the second they get that franchise back up off the ground, he's going to be top tier. That's a fucking gay superhero. You don't need to change an existing superhero to be gay when you have a great fucking hero right here who was gay to begin with. And nobody has a problem with Deadpool. I mean, I'm sure there's fucking idiots that have problems with Deadpool being gay, but the majority of people have no problem because that's what Deadpool was. You know what I mean? And at some point we just have to stop listening to the idiots. And most of them are in the marketing department and the rest of them are on Twitter. That's the truth of it. That is where the idiots of the world go. Twitter and the marketing world, because these people dictate the rest of it for the rest of the world, and they really shouldn't. Spend your money where you want to. Don't spend it where you don't. If you have a problem with something, don't watch it. And if you wanted something to see, create it yourself. Because if you're so right, if you're so in belief that what you have is right and will connect with other people, then fucking cash in, man. What are you waiting for? Go for it. That's all I have to say. I've ranted this entire. We're at 1 hour and 3 minutes, and I'm telling you this right now. I think I've ranted for 45 of them. So I'm gonna shut the fuck up. Rainwater, if you have something to say, you go for it, boy.
I think you said it. I think you said it well, Joe. I don't really have anything else to add in addition to that. Yeah, well said.
Next week, I promise I will not be sipping on Smashed Pumpkin beer while we're going at it, but I will take a minute to advertise. Number one, I am back on Twitter, folks. Only for a short while because I am prepping to do Haunted Home Theater returning this October. And the reason for that is because we will be doing more than one Haunted Home Theater. So I look forward to you if you subscribe to the Jow Films YouTube page, Jow Films LLC. That LLC is important because some idiot who started something made a Jow Films YouTube page way before me. I'm the real Jow. I don't care what this guy's claim to fame is. Fuck him. It's really fun. We do a second screen experience. We watch a movie together. We got a live chat going on where people are all chatting and discussing the movie while we watch it. Occasionally you will pause it and I will jump in with my video interstitials and I will give you some trivia and some fun skits and useless banter about the movie or an excuse for you to go to the bathroom or go and make another round of popcorn or something. It's a fun time, and I will be hosting spooky movies all throughout October. I hope you'll tune in. Mr. Rainwater, you just had an update with Plants vs. Zombies today, correct? What was the skinny with that?
I mean, I was posting about it. It doesn't really financially or affect me in any particular way, but the Zomnibus, the Volume 2, got released. Yeah, just recently. So.
And Mr. Rainwater was the New York Times best-selling colorist on Plants vs. Zombies.
Yeah.
He won't tell you that, so I'm going to have to be his hype man and go around and champion.
I mentioned it in my bios.
Yeah, but who made you put it in your bio?
Yeah, that's true. That was it.
But that's our announcements. And I will say that now that we've done this recording, we will be doing one more for the month of September, and then we are in October, folks, which means I am going to force Rainwater to talk about horror movies and Halloween the entire goddamn month. So stay tuned for that. I have some fun topics planned for us for this year, and we hope to hear from you. I would like to point out that nobody tweeted me after our last podcast dropped saying I am real, which is what I asked for people to do. So I'm starting to think that maybe we just have bots and our moms checking in to see what we're talking about. Who knows? I'm still enjoying doing this with you, Mr. Rainwater, so I'm happy to keep it up. That'll be it for us this week, and we will see you all next week. Good night.
Later.